Welcome. My name is Kimberly Hendy, and I am one of the brokers and co-founders at South Cedar Real Estate. Thank you all for being here today. We're excited to have you join us, and we appreciate you taking the time to be with us this morning. I'd like to give a special thank you to all that helped get this event set up and organized. Katie Bowman from South Cedar Real Estate, Leona and Renee from Martinez Law, and Caitlin from NFM Lending. So thank you guys so much. We wouldn't be here without you guys. We have a great group of professionals with us this morning that are going to cover legal topics, real estate, and lending. And our hope is that they can provide some insight for us and answer some of the most common questions that we see in today's market. Thank you to everyone who submitted questions ahead of time. We're going to try our best to get through as many as we can this morning, but there will be some time at the end if you have additional questions or just want to connect with some of our panelists or continue networking. We would love for you to do that. Before we get started, I would like to have each of our panelists introduce themselves. We have Jane Floyd from NFM Lending. We have Greg Wilkerson from South Cedar Real Estate, and we have Cristen Martinez from Martinez Law.
Good morning, everyone, and thank you all so much for coming. And Greg, thanks for putting this on. It was your brilliant idea. And I'm Jane Floyd, as she said, with the Floyd Team Home Loans. And I have been serving clients for about 35 years. Our team has. So we've served over 7,000 clients, and just super excited here today to answer any questions and honored to be in front of you guys. So thank you.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Greg Wilkerson. I am one of the brokers at South Cedar with Kimberly. I'm a Tampa native, have lived here for going on 40 years now, minus a few years in college and law school. I'm also a licensed attorney. I practiced real estate law for about 7 or 8 years, right after the Great Recession, and so have seen the ups and downs of the real estate markets. We started off as an investing brokerage. We still do a lot of commercial investing, but we really rolled the idea of starting this brokerage and bringing on agents about 2 years ago and rebranded as South Cedar Real Estate, and have gone from, I think we were at 2 agents with James Lascara and I 2 years ago, and now we're up to over 20, so growing rapidly and looking to grow more. Excited to talk with everybody today and hope bring some clarity to questions that you have.
Good morning, my name is Cristen Martinez. I am the founding attorney at Martinez Law. I started the practice back in 2015. We do provide litigation and transactional legal services in the real estate space, but one of our big passions and my big passion is providing resources and education to the real estate community and real estate professionals. That's something that we have prioritized since the beginning days of the law firm. I'm not as smart as Greg, and I'm still practicing law, so I haven't gotten out of it yet, but very happy to share my insights with that perspective of being on the litigation side, because I see what gets people sued, what gets people in situations where they feel the need to sue another person, and so hopefully I can help you and your clients avoid those situations.
All right. Well, thank you, Jane and Greg and Cristen. With that, we'll go ahead and get started. The first question is, what are the most misunderstood timelines in the Florida contract, especially regarding inspections, financing, and escrow deposits?
So the biggest things when we're talking about buyers and sellers and the most misunderstood things is, the first one is that deadlines exist, that they are important, and that time is of the essence in the contract. Meaning, if a deadline is missed by an hour, that is a material breach of the contract. And again, clients, especially buyers, need to be very aware of this. With regard to, I'll start with the escrow deposit deadline. That is one big misconception that I see, is a lot of agents too believe that the making of that initial deposit into escrow is a requirement to form a binding contract. That is not true. The thought process behind this misconception is that initial deposit constitutes the consideration, which is a requirement to form a legal contract. Again, that is not true. Our FAR contracts are actually very clear in that a default exists when any deadline or any obligation is missed, including the buyer's obligation to make the escrow deposit timely. That's how we know that there is a fully binding and enforceable contract before that initial deposit is ever made. So It's extremely important for you and your clients to understand that and know that deadline usually is 2 or 3 days. Comes very quickly, especially if you're going under contract on a Friday or over a weekend. It can get tricky. So make sure that you're fully educating and staying on top of your buyers to get that done on time. With regard to the inspection period, the biggest thing that I see is the belief that so long as I am requesting repairs on behalf of my buyer, or buyer and seller are engaged in good faith negotiations over repairs, that inspection period deadline is somehow told or extended. It is not. So as a buyer and a buyer's agent, it is not really a great time a day or two before the expiration of that inspection period to start asking for repairs. Because while I think we all know a seller has no obligation to make repairs, a seller doesn't even have an obligation to respond to a repair request. So make sure again that you're fully educating your buyers on that. So if they do want to make repair requests, you're doing that timely. And I think the financing deadline was the last one. The biggest thing I see with this is buyers think, they don't read their contracts. So buyers think that if I get denied financing, I can cancel the contract and get my deposit back. That is not true. Only if they get denied financing, they get denied financing within the loan approval period and they communicate that in writing to the seller within that loan approval period, do they get to cancel the contract and get their deposit back. So a lot of times we see the closing date extended because of financing issues, but the loan approval period is not also extended. So the buyers think, I have more time to get my loan in order, and if it doesn't work out, I can cancel. And that ends up biting a lot of buyers in the rear end. So I promise my answers won't be this long going forward, but I don't know if you have anything to add.
Yeah, so I'd like to talk about some of this from the business perspective of a now former attorney. And so one of the things that I see a lot is, what is the actual effective date of a contract? And one of the essential factors to establish a contract is you have to have delivery. That is required. So if you're a buyer or you're a buyer's agent and you send over a fully executed, or you wait to send over a fully executed contract, let's say you execute it on a Friday, it's late, but you don't send it until the following day, your effective date does not start until that next day. And that needs to be clearly identified and communicated to the other side. They're like, hey, sorry, whatever, we waited to send this, it was late. Everybody needs to know when that effective date starts, because if you don't know when your timelines end. And if you don't know when your timelines end, then you're really compromising your client. So that's one thing that I see very often that people struggle with. I'd say one thing I always try to do with my contracts is not put, especially when I'm representing buyers, is, and I know you've talked about this online, is I don't like to put specific closing dates in an initial offer because, and here's my reasoning, and I'll use some timelines. Let's say we put an offer in on January 1st and I put a closing date of February 4th, which is about, 35 days. We go back and forth with counter offers, and then 7 days later we sign a contract. We have a 30-day financing contingency, but now we're at January 7th with a 30-day financing contingency. We've executed and our closing date is February 4th. How does that make sense? We've got contradicting terms in the contract. So what I always tell people is make it within a specified period, right? So that way you're pushing out the closing date as you're pushing out those negotiations and effective dates. So just make sure that you're aware of that, because you cannot have contradicting terms in a contract on day one.